For decades, the Reiner family was Hollywood's picture of quiet stability. No scandals, no chaos, just love, loyalty, and privacy. Then, in a single night, everything collapsed. After the brutal deaths of Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle, the public believed the story was over. The suspect had been named, the tragedy had an explanation. Silence followed, until Tracy Reiner spoke, not with accusations, not with anger, but with words that reopened every wound, an unfinished will, a notebook filled with regret, a father's apology that came too late, and a truth far more painful than any headline that this family did not fall apart from hatred, but from love that was never fully understood. This is not the story people thought they knew. This is the story that was hidden inside the silence. To understand why Tracy Reiner's words mattered so deeply, you have to understand who Rob Reiner was inside his own home, not as a director, but as a father. Despite a career that demanded endless time, attention, and emotional energy, Rob Reiner built his life around his family. Friends often said that no matter how busy he was, his children always came first. Dinner at home mattered. Conversations mattered. Being present mattered. He wasn't a distant Hollywood parent. He was involved, attentive, and deeply committed to the idea that love meant showing up, again and again. Rob raised 4 children under one roof in Brentwood: Tracy, whom he adopted from his first marriage, and Jake, Nick, and Romy with his second wife, Michelle. To the outside world, it looked seamless. A blended family that worked, a rare example of stability in an industry known for fracture. But inside that harmony were very different relationships. With Tracy, Rob offered reassurance and emotional safety. She has spoken about long evenings where her father listened without judgment, reminding her that no matter how strong she became, she would never face life alone. With Jake, Rob bonded through shared rituals, baseball games, travel, inherited traditions passed down from Carl Reiner himself. Romy, the youngest, received constant attention and care, her thoughts and worries treated as important and worthy of time. Love was present in every corner of that house. Yet even in families built on love, balance is fragile. Because while 3 of the children found stability, one relationship quietly struggled. And that imbalance, subtle at first, invisible to outsiders, would become the fault line running beneath everything. It was a tension no one wanted to name, and one the family hoped love alone could eventually heal. That fragile balance unraveled when it came to Nick Reiner. From early on, his relationship with his father carried a different weight. Where Rob connected easily with his other children, communication with Nick often felt strained, as if they were speaking 2 different emotional languages. There were no dramatic conflicts at first, just distance, missed connections, moments where understanding slipped away before it could take shape. As Nick entered his teenage years, that distance deepened. At 15, drugs entered his life, and they did not arrive loudly. There was no single moment of collapse. Addiction crept in quietly, disguising itself as escape. What followed was a cycle that would haunt the family for years: rehabilitation, brief stability, relapse, and then disappearance. Rob and Michelle watched helplessly as their son drifted further away. They opened their home, they funded treatment. They waited through nights filled with fear and uncertainty, unsure if their son was safe or even alive. Every return brought hope. Every relapse carved it down again. At one point, following professional advice, Rob made a decision he would later regret deeply. He chose what was called tough love, forcing Nick into rehabilitation and cutting off financial support in hopes that consequences would spark change. Instead, it widened the emotional gap between them. Years passed in this exhausting pattern. Nick spent time homeless, moving between states, slipping in and out of sobriety, and through it all, Rob carried a quiet, crushing guilt, wondering whether his love had been too soft or not soft enough. What no one outside the family could see was how much fear lived behind that silence, and how close this relationship was moving toward a breaking point no one yet imagined. In 2015, a fragile opening appeared where years of silence had failed. Being Charlie was not just a film, it was Rob Reiner's last attempt to reach his son in a language Nick might finally hear. The story mirrored their lives too closely to ignore an addicted young man, a famous father, and a relationship strained by fear, love, and misunderstanding. This time, Rob didn't lecture. He listened. The filmmaking process forced father and son into the same room, confronting truths they had avoided for years. There were arguments, raised voices, long pauses filled with discomfort, but there was also something new: honesty. Rob later admitted that working on the film helped him understand how deeply Nick had been hurting. Nick, in turn, felt seen rather than corrected. For a moment, it seemed like progress, but understanding, as they would soon learn, is not the same as healing. In 2015, a fragile opening appeared where years of silence had failed. Being Charlie was not just a film. It was Rob Reiner's last attempt to reach his son in a language Nick might finally hear. The story mirrored their lives too closely to ignore an addicted young man, a famous father, and a relationship strained by fear, love, and misunderstanding. This time, Rob didn't lecture. He listened. The filmmaking process forced father and son into the same room, confronting truths they had avoided for years. There were arguments, raised voices, long pauses filled with discomfort, but there was also something new: honesty. Rob later admitted that working on the film helped him understand how deeply Nick had been hurting. Nick, in turn, felt seen rather than corrected. For a moment, it seemed like progress, but understanding, as they would soon learn, is not the same as healing. After the arrests and headlines, the noise slowly faded. What remained was silence, the kind that settles after a family has been broken beyond recognition. That was when Tracy Reiner finally spoke. She did not step forward to accuse or defend. She spoke as a daughter trying to make sense of a loss that felt both sudden and long in the making. Her voice trembled as she described the shock of losing her parents in a single night, and the unbearable weight of realizing there were words her father never had the chance to say. Tracy revealed that her father had left behind an unfinished will, not because he was careless, but because he was conflicted. Rob Reiner had spent his final years torn between love and fear, between protecting his children and worrying that one of them might not survive without more help or might destroy himself with it. The will was not a document of favoritism, but of concern. What shattered Tracy the most was what she found afterward. In her father's study, among scripts and handwritten notes, she discovered a small notebook. Inside were not professional ideas, but personal confessions, thoughts Rob had never spoken out loud. Page after page revealed a man consumed by regret. Regret for believing tough love would work. Regret for moments of distance. Regret for confusing discipline with protection. One passage stood out above all others. Rob wrote that his greatest fear was not losing his son, but that his son might believe he had been abandoned. "If you think your father doesn't love you," he wrote, "that is my fault." The words were not polished. They were raw. Written by a man who loved deeply but feared he had failed to communicate it. Tracy understood then what the real tragedy was. This family had not been destroyed by hatred or neglect. It had been destroyed by love expressed in different languages. Rob loved his son fiercely, obsessively, desperately, but love, when filtered through fear and exhaustion, can become silent, and silence, over time, becomes distance. In the end, Tracy did not describe her parents as perfect. She described them as human parents who tried everything they knew, who hoped longer than most, and who paid the highest price for a misunderstanding that never found its way back to words. "The deepest tragedy," she said softly, "was not that her parents died. It was that they never got the chance to finally be understood." In the end, this story leaves us with no villains, only unanswered questions and irreversible loss. A family that loved deeply, tried relentlessly, and still could not outrun tragedy. Rob Reiner was not a careless father. Michelle was not an absent mother. And their children were not ungrateful. They were human beings struggling to love each other through pain they did not fully understand. What Tracy Reiner shared was not meant to reopen wounds, but to explain them. To remind us that silence can grow between people who care the most, and that love, when left unspoken, can be tragically misunderstood. If this story made you reflect on your own family, take a moment to pause. Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe these untold stories matter, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Because sometimes the stories we need to hear most are the ones told too late.